My name is Mike Lieberman. I'm the principal solution engineer for AMI Cloud, so BMC AMI Cloud. We'll talk about actually, I have another slide here. So we'll talk about object storages, and more, we'll talk about why object storages and why do we think object storage is something you have to consider, something you have to think about, or even start planning the migration? I love this slide. This is I saw just a little bit about myself. Maybe I haven't. I've been on the mainframe, working on the mainframe in the mainframe world for the last 20 something years, close to 30 years. And this is the first. When I just started, I started as a COBOL programmer, and when I just joined the organization and got my first assignment to write a small COBOL program, this is what I was told: mainframe will be soon disappear. Don't start learning new things. Start looking into different technologies. Well, 20 something years later, we're still here. Mainframe is still one of the major platforms in the world, and it doesn't look like it is going anywhere, at least from what we see with customers. So this statement is so incorrect, and actually it gives me pleasure to talk about it, because I am a true mainframe believer. Again, I've been doing it for many years. I think it's a brilliant platform, and I think people may be misunderstanding this platform. Anyway, so the mainframe is not going to disappear, but there are problems, right? There are problems on the mainframe. We'll talk about some of the problems that we, as a software provider, see. But when we look into virtual tape libraries of VTLs, we do see a problem. We do see a problem with extending or using the virtual type libraries, and let's go on and we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so CIO magazine quote from last year: every organization needs to start looking into migrating, or at least start to planning migrating off virtual tape libraries, VTLs, as part of its mainframe modernization strategy. Sorry, I'll close the door. The dog is barking. One of the advantages of virtual conference. So this is a statement from the CIO magazine. I truly actually think that this is something that organizations should consider. It can be like a hybrid solution, like VTL and object storage, but an object storage and cloud in general is the future. This is, we see that with many customers. And when you plan your mainframe modernization strategy, this is something you really need to consider. And if I'll move and talk about a survey by Gartner that was published maybe 3 years ago. So they say that by this year, 2024, 40% of the IO, the CIO, CTOs will start implementing some sort of a hybrid cloud storage, hybrid cloud as well, but hybrid cloud storage architecture. And well, it will be an increase from 2020. That is understandable. But the second number is more interesting, because by 2025, Gartner says that 35% of the data centers the storage will be on some sort of hybrid solution, either cloud storage and VTLs, or a combination of that. And actually, we see with customers that this number will be probably higher. It will be towards the 50%, as far as we see from, I don't know if you saw the BMC mainframe survey, but we do see a lot of interest into migrating or involving cloud storage. When I say cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean public cloud. It can be on-prem. So object storage that is on-prem, there are cloud providers that actually provide on-prem clouds or virtual private cloud, they call it. So cloud is just a very generic name for a technology that allows it to store data in any type of an object storage. So let's look into legacy versus cloud. Okay, so and how we as mainframe personnel or mainframe technicians see data stored in virtual tape libraries versus object storage. So we have at the top we have the legacy data management. This is how we call it, and this is the traditional way that we store data into virtual tape libraries. So we have the proprietary data types. We have a FICAN connection to a proprietary tape storage. And we also have a billable MIPS in the middle, right? Because writing to tape storage by any software, backup software, or tape management software will require MIPS. This is how it works. Another interesting thing with the legacy data management is that it is not open to the world, right? It is very hard to open your data that is on virtual tape libraries to cloud applications, for example, business intelligence, artificial intelligence. We work with a customer that was interested in bringing data that is on their tape systems from the 80s, I think, or 70s or 80s, and they wanted to expose and make this data available to AI applications. They wanted to calculate and run AI learning models on data from the 70s. So when you think about it, it makes sense because the data is there. They own the data. Why not use it? So this is, and they had a very big challenge in terms of making this BI and AI applications access the data that is on virtual tape library. So when we talk about cloud data management, it's slightly different, right? So we still have the proprietary data types, we still have the mainframe data types, but we actually going to use TCP/IP instead of FICAN to write to an object storage. Again, it can be on-prem, it can be off-prem. Usually when you deal with new technology, relatively new technology, TCP/IP, for example, you can actually look into non-billable MIPS, right? Maybe you write something that will use the zip engines. Maybe you use Java, maybe you use DB2 stored procedure or something like that, that will actually take advantage of the zip engines that the mainframe provides, and by that lower the cost of your data management in general. So TCP/IP is one of the ways, well, actually one of the most common ways to communicate with an object storage. Now, the object storage, as I mentioned, can be on-prem, like, for example, we have our friends from Dell here, so they have their own object storage, which is on-prem. And we also have in the cloud the big, the big hyperscalers like Amazon, AWS, Azure, Microsoft, Google, GCP. The point here is when the data is in the object storage, it is much more accessible to the cloud application, right? So it is accessible. It's very easy for an AI machine learning application to to get its data for training data from an object storage rather than mainframe tape. Okay, and again, this is the point here is that we don't really need tape storage in the modern world. We can work with cloud storage or object storage instead of tape systems. Let's talk a little bit about again. I don't know what's the procedure about questions, but please, since we are relatively small audience, jump in ask anytime. I'd be happy to answer. So moving on to why and why now. And we can think about, we can think of 7 reasons, at least 7 reasons why why organizations should start thinking about cloud object storage adoption as part of the mainframe modernization strategy. So we look into cost optimization. Obviously, it is cheaper to run cloud object storage than tape. Complexity is a very important factor. Security and compliance. We'll talk about the DORA regulations, mostly in the EU, but also in the UK. There are a few regulations around it. And cyber resiliency. So we hear about cyber attacks, and the mainframe also is part of that, unfortunately. We talked about analytics and artificial intelligence. So how can we expose the data? Workforce, that's actually, I have an interesting story about that when we get to this. I'll tell you, but so workforce and skill challenges, okay, right? People are retiring, and the new guy, the new mainframe guys, not always happy to learn ISPF and tape management systems and so on. So workforce is really a challenge, and scalability and flexibility. Obviously, uh, object storage is a lot more scalable than tape libraries. That's, we know that, but we'll get to that. So let's start with cost. Okay, so um, when we talk about capital expenditure, uh, when you purchase or when you invest in a virtual tape library, it is a substantial investment, and the point is, it is an upfront investment in the hardware and in the software, right? On top of that, we have the ongoing maintenance and support costs that you invest in a virtual tape library. And then usually you have to calculate in advance how much storage you need, right? So in many cases, we see with customers that it is inefficient. So they didn't calculate it correctly. And sorry, there's someone to admit. Yeah. So inefficient resource utilization. So when you planning correctly, and at some point you get to a point where you're out of storage in your VTL. So you have to kind of provision the excess capacity to accommodate your peak workload. That's when this is one of the problems when we talk about inefficient resource utilization. Moving on to, I'm sorry, I'm cautious of the time here, so I can talk for hours. So the reason number 2 is reduced complexity, right? So when we talk about object storage, it is simple, and it is easy to automate. And we talked about mainframe modernization. So object storage is something that is a modern way, a more modern way to store data. uh, Complex configuration and complex management. So with VTL, let's face it, it is complex. It is sometimes you need a lot of experience and knowledge to manage virtual tape library compared to the alternative. So it's difficult in setup, it's difficult in an ongoing management, and it is difficult in troubleshooting. Let's face it. I mean, in many cases, you have to open a case, a support ticket, and wait for the response. Scalability and the capacity. So the storage in virtual tape library is limited, right? You pay or you buy the storage, and that's it. That's all you have. So adding physical tapes or disks to VTL is time consuming, and yeah, it is basically very hard to adapt to the changing data storage needs. So, and we know you cannot keep everything on DASD, right? I mean, the amount of storage we have to handle today as storage administrator is huge. I mean, and when you migrate this this data or the storage to VTL, sometimes you just reach your capacity, and there is no easy way to scale up when we talk about virtual tape library. And the last thing is well, compatibility with modern applications. I mean, I talked about that. That's something that it is very hard for application, especially from outside the mainframe, to access data that is on the tape system. Security compliance, my favorite topic. So breaches in compliance and data integrity, that's something that we all have to deal every day. When we talk about actual physical tapes, so we had a customer that used to you send the tapes for the DR system with lorries to their secondary site, and in many cases, some of the tapes were lost. Right? I don't know if it was stolen on purpose or lost, but eventually they didn't have the full backup in their secondary site. So in case of a disaster, you never know what you lost. So that's very I see it as very something very dangerous to have. Other than that, we can have unauthorized access to sensitive information, right? So someone is trying to access is stealing the data, stealing the tape, and is trying to access that. Ransom attacks is something that we all heard about, and it is very frequent. We hear it from customers. So with ransom attack, it is attackers are quickly encrypt data stored on tapes or on disks, and then it is migrated to tapes, and they make it inaccessible, forcing organization to pay ransom. So one of the results is jeopardize data integrity and obviously compliance and regulation. Um, Auditability is also something we have to consider. DORA, I spoke about DORA earlier. So this is one of the requirements by DORA is to be able to audit the data that is on the virtual tape library or any other data. So if you're not familiar with DORA, it's a regulation in the EU that forces to be honest, it forces financial organizations to comply with a set of rules that will protect them against cyber threats. And one of the requirements of DORA, I don't remember exactly what the DORA stands for, is to have another copy of the data in a different data center. Okay, so for example, your data center is in Germany. They want your data to also be in the US, for example. So this is one of the regulations for having another copy in a different location. So we started talking about cyber resiliency, and we talked about recovery and vulnerability and inadequate data backup and replication. So this is also related to DORA, but in many cases, we talked about the customer that sends the data with, the tapes with lorries. Some customers don't even do that. Some customers don't even replicate. So, and the reason is the cost that is and the complexity involved in using virtual tape libraries. So it is difficult to create redundant copies of data, and it is difficult to restore it quickly if you're in the case of a disaster, and cyber attacks, system failures, natural disasters, all these are part of the organization's cyber resiliency strategy. And when you work on VTLs, it is a lot more complex. So I spoke a little bit about AI and analytics, but the point here is that the data is siloed. Okay, so um, it is very hard accessing data that is on VTL by applications which are not mainframe application. If you have a COBOL program or a SAS program that needs to access tape, shouldn't be a problem. We've been doing it for years. But we all know that there are many other applications running outside of the mainframe, and when these application needs access to data that is on VTL, it becomes a lot more complex. It becomes a lot more complex even in terms of performance. So let's say you have a BI application, business intelligence, that needs access to, I don't know, 5 TB of data that is on tape. So there is like the overhead of sending the data or asking for the data or from tape, and then the tape will bring it back, and then the BI application will, consume it. So there is an overhead when we talk about virtual tape libraries. Scalability and flexibility, the point here, you cannot easily scale up when you have VTLs. Okay, so um, nothing to add to that. It is in many cases one of the, I would say, toppest reason that organizations start looking into virtual tape into cloud storage. Sorry about that. It is expensive to scale up with the VTL. It is complex, and sometimes it is for organizations we work with. It is easier to actually start looking into an alternative object storage. Limited new talent. So I spoke a little bit about that. I was in a presentation last week, like the company sales kickoff, and one of the presenters, he is the CTO of a big company, said that they had like a planned retirement plan or something like that in the organization, and many of the mainframe professionals were part of this retiring process. I mean, they offered it to them and they accepted. And he said he lost close to 1,000 years of experience when these guys that were mainframe technicians retired. So when we talk about limited new talent, this is the example. And people are retiring. We lose knowledge. Um, I mean, as a system programmer, there was always the guy that used to go to and ask, about an band and a 0C4 band, and then what's this and this and this. But this guy retired, and I still, or the guys that come after me, still are not ready, not familiar with the complexity of the mainframe and the complexity of the virtual tape library. So the new talent is also something that can affect um, storage management, and increased cost and risk is something that we know hiring external consultants and outsourcing more risk, more cost to the company, and yeah, nothing to add there. So scalability and flexibility as data volume increases. So traditional VTLs are struggling to expand. We talked about that efficiency in performance, and then you have bottlenecks, and you have operational challenges. So when the organization grows and the amount of data grows, sometimes, actually not sometimes, in many cases, virtual tape libraries just cannot handle that. Okay, and then you have inefficiency, and then you have, as I mentioned, bottlenecks and challenges. So this is another reason to start considering moving to cloud storage. Okay, so these are the reasons why organizations should start thinking about object storage. And this is where BMC comes in, and this will be a little bit of a pitch, but I do believe that this AMI Cloud or this product is a very good solution to the challenges I just spoke about. So I have about 10 minutes. I'll go quickly, and hopefully I'll make the point here. So AMI Cloud is an innovative solution that will eventually replace or essentially replaces virtual tape libraries with object storage. It is a mainframe application. It is essentially a starter task that runs on ZOS, on the mainframe, that is responsible for replacing the backup software and the virtual tape library. It provides the options to do a backup, to do archives, to do full dumps like volume dumps, and it can also import data from VTL, from the tape system. The interesting thing with any cloud is it sends the data to the object storage over TCP/IP. And when we work with TCP/IP, one of the biggest advantages, we can open multiple connections. So the data is sent in parallel as opposed to a serial connections when we send data to VTL. So imagine how faster the data can be sent to the object storage compared to data sent to virtual tape libraries. And this is one of the biggest advantages of TCP/IP versus a FICON connection. Then we have the object storage at the end, and we talked about the challenges of the workforce. So there is also a management server, which is a web-based application that manages all the activities or the policies in the product. So the designs behind the thought behind the design of this UI or this application is that the new workforce not always like to use ISPF panels. They don't always like to use TSO commands. So although you still have the option to do that with, you can run TSO commands with the product, you actually have a UI, a web application that helps you manage everything that the product provides. I know you've probably heard of ZOSMF, which it looks like it's the direction in general of IBM to move forward with web applications rather than continue with ISPF. I mean, I think there's still going to be a lot of ISPF development, but they're also moving towards a web application. I think Broadcom is also doing that, and BMC definitely. So there is like a shift, as far as I see, in terms of moving to web application rather than ISPF. Back to this architecture. So we have the management server, we have the object storage, can be on-prem, can be in the cloud. And we also have something we call analytics. So the thought behind analytics is, listen, you already have your backup taken, right? So you already have your backup taken to the object storage, but it just sits there. It doesn't do anything. So it's data that sits there. Imagine you have a bank account, you have money in your bank account, but it doesn't make any interest. Same thing here. You have data in your object storage that doesn't do anything. Why shouldn't we use it, right? Here analytics come in. So analytics takes your backups and transforms it into data that is available to be consumed by cloud applications. Okay, so let's say, and I gave the example of the company that wanted data from the 70s that was on tapes. So what we did with them is we took the data sets that on tapes, we imported them with the client to the object storage. It was AWS, yeah, AWS. No, actually, no, sorry, it was Dell ECS. So we actually imported into Dell ECS object storage, And then we ran analytics on these backups, which were in an object format after they migrated or imported, and we made it available to. They had like a BI application. Don't remember what. I think it was Oracle or something like that. So they actually were managed to use the data that was originally on tape with with converting it and transforming it into something that is available for a BI application. So this is the flow, and just an example of a customer. So Nedbank, a South African customer. I mentioned the the speed that it takes to use TCP/IP versus Ficon, and we can see that they reached 16 times faster backups and restore time with AMI Cloud, with the AMI Cloud solution. Some of it was because AMI Cloud is zip eligible, so everything runs on zips. The second reason was TCP/IP. There is an option to create multiple connections to the object storage, and we reached that number. 50% reduction in protection costs. So obviously, they replaced the VTL system with object storage, and they actually saved 50%. So I like this statement by the IT manager. So he says that a backup job that took almost the entire weekend now ran in 36 minutes. And I think for us as as a software provider, as providers of the BMC AMI Cloud, that's the best thing we can get. I mean, we're very happy after after we got this statement. So this is another customer, America First, AFCU. They got, again, we talked about MIPS, sorry, ZIP versus CP. They got 90% reduction in their MSU consumption, and they actually saved 50% in the data management costs. So they implemented AMI Cloud Data, and again, took 5 minutes. What used to take 2 hours took 5 minutes. Everything, CPU cost was reduced, storage was reduced, floor space was reduced, and we were very happy. I have 5 minutes, so that was AMI Cloud Data, and that was tape replacement. AMI Cloud Vault is another a similar product, but it answers a cyber resiliency problem, and that is creating another copy of your data in a different region or a different location. And we use the object storage replication capabilities in order to create or answer this requirement. So let's start with immutability. So one of the requirements today by, I mean, the UK government have their own requirement, the EU have their own requirement, but essentially you need to create an immutable copy, immutable backup of your data. Immutable means that no one can play with this, I'll put it nicely, no one can change, no one can mess with this backup, okay? So it's a backup that you create, and it is immutable, cannot be changed, okay? So there are a few ways to implement it in the object storage, like versioning, or even actually cutting the line to the bucket. But this is when we talk about air gap. So immutability is sending a backup to the object storage, making sure no one can change it ever, unless there is a process that runs and like a life cycle process. So when we talk about immutability, AMI Cloud Vault takes the data and sends it to the object storage and makes sure that the data is immutable. Okay, So, and this is what we see here in the diagram. Furthermore, the next step is the object storage's replication capabilities. So you can actually send the data once from the mainframe to the object storage, and then the object storage will cross-region replicate it to other regions. So a story, I worked with a customer in Finland, and that was like a couple of years ago when the war between Russia and Ukraine started. Finland wanted to join NATO, and one of NATO's requirements were to have their financial data or the bank's data in a NATO country. Okay, so this, I guess, one of the requirements by NATO. So this customer reached out to us and asked what we can do to help them. And we actually installed AMI Cloud Vault. We took the data and we stored it in AWS S3 in a local region. All right, I think it was, I actually don't remember what the region was, but it doesn't really matter. So they took another copy of the data, a third copy of the data of the backup in AWS, let's say locally, and then AWS replicated the data to Germany. So Germany is a NATO country, and the data was continuously replicated from the Finland region to the Germany region. Everyone's happy. Okay, so this is just an example of the power of object storage replication and the power of using object storage for your mainframe backups. Another interesting thing that AMI Cloud Vault can do is IPL your mainframe from everywhere. Okay, so we have a process in which you can store your, we call it a one-pack system. So you take a backup of your 1 or 2 volumes, and it is stored in an object storage. We run a process to make it accessible to the mainframe to IPL from, right? So, and this is a Black Knight, a customer in the US. This is exactly what they do. A bare metal, a clean room, recover. They take, they build the data, they prepare the data to be recovered from everywhere, so that they tested it, and it is actually air gapped. So air gap means that there's no access to the data. So what the way they implemented they took a backup, they sent it to an object storage, they cut the line, which means that the backup is air gapped, isolated, no one can access it. And when they need to run a DR, or they need to run a test, they bring up a mainframe in a different location, which points to this air gap location. Obviously, they bring the line back, and they start the IPL, the mainframe from this location with AMI Cloud Vault capabilities, and then they actually start recovering all the data, all the volumes from the object storage in that different location. So and everything is automated. They build like a very interesting automation around it. But essentially, this is what one of the functions of AMI Cloud Vault. And to be honest, it's pretty cool. I mean, when we saw that, when we worked with them, it was pretty interesting. So to summarize, object storage is the future, right? I mean, we saw what Gartner has to say, what the CIO magazine has to say, and we saw the challenges, and we saw that these challenges can be addressed with AMI Cloud Vault. But again, we see it as the future, right? So we see object storage as the future. Obviously, we'll still have virtual tape libraries, but when we talk about modernization, when we're looking forward, when we talk about innovation, object storage is one of the platforms to think about. And again, we all know when companies don't innovate, don't move forward, they lose customers, they lose revenue, and so on. So Cloud Object Storage provide agile capabilities that were never available with legacy tape or virtual storage, including the ability to securely share mainframe data with other cloud applications and analytics in a new way. So if you want to learn a little bit more about hybrid cloud resources, there are a few blogs and analyst podcasts. There is an interesting blog here by Gil. He is the product manager, sorry, for Emi Cloud. And there is also a video that you can watch. That is it from me. There is like a session feedback. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And I don't have the QR code, but you have the session code. Hopefully you can actually put in the URL, and it will lead directly to the session. And that's all. So 48 minutes, I made it. Thank you very much. Brad, back to you.
Thank you, Michael. Very good. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Any questions, anybody? Oh, any questions, anybody, before we go? I take silence as a no then, Michael.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very
if
much.
you, yeah,
Have a
and if
good
you
day.
need, thank you,
Bye-bye.
guys. Bye-bye.